Woman mocked me for my age, only to share dinner as my son's fiancée the very next day. At a design competition, I was mocked for my age and humiliated in front of everyone. Less than 24 hours later, the same woman who belittled me walked into my home as my son's fiancée. For a long time, I believed my time had passed. Design had always been my dream, but life had other plans. First, there was my husband, then our child, the house, and all the responsibilities that came with them. Everything else seemed to take priority, and my dream faded into the background. But then, at 60, something unexpected happened. I felt a spark inside me, a renewed sense of possibility. I realized that I could still create. One day, I received an email that changed everything. It was from a prestigious design competition, and my project had made it to the finals. I couldn't believe it. I cried, overwhelmed by joy, fear, and everything that this moment meant to me. It wasn't just any project. It was a piece of my history, and my family's history. I had started this project years ago, when my son Daniel was just a little boy. He loved to draw flowers, and he would proudly give me his drawings. I kept every single one, thinking that someday I would use them in my work. Now, all these years later, those childhood drawings had become the foundation of my first major design project. I had transformed them into sophisticated patterns, blending them with modern design trends. I was excited to share this news with Daniel. I wanted to surprise him with how far my project had come. Over dinner, I told him about the competition and how my design had reached the finals. He stopped eating, looked at me with a serious expression, and said, "Mom, this is incredible, but are you sure?" I was a little taken aback, but I replied confidently, "Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be?" He looked at me more closely and said, "Because you've always been afraid of change." He was right. I had always been afraid of change, afraid that it might be too late for me to chase my dream. But in that moment, I knew that if I didn't try now, I might never get another chance. I had to go for it. "I have to do this, Daniel," I said firmly. He smiled, a little mischievously, and said, "Then you need the perfect outfit." I sighed, feeling a bit overwhelmed. "Daniel, I'm a designer, not a model." But he wasn't having it. "This is a design competition. You're not just presenting your project, you're presenting yourself. Let's go shopping." Before I could protest, he had already started searching for stores on his phone. Then he paused and added, "By the way, I need to buy something too." I raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" He hesitated for a moment before replying, "A ring." I almost dropped my tea. "You're going to..." He nodded, smiling. "Yes." I felt my heart swell with joy. My little boy was taking the most important step of his life. "Oh, Daniel," I whispered, overwhelmed by emotion. "Will you help me pick one?" I asked. He grinned. "Of course I will." We made plans to go shopping together. It was one of those rare moments when the future felt bright, full of excitement and possibility. We both had big events ahead, his proposal and my competition. But little did I know that this bright day, full of dreams and hopes, would soon be overshadowed by disappointment. A few days later, I found myself entering the spacious, modern office where the final stage of the competition was being held. The moment I stepped inside, a wave of nervousness washed over me. I could feel my heart racing, but I stood tall, reminding myself that I had a great project and I truly believed in it. I had worked hard, and I knew my design had something special. As I looked around, I noticed the other contestants. They were young, stylish, and confident, each one seeming so sure of themselves. Some of them didn't even try to hide their surprise at seeing me there. One girl with short pink hair gave me a quick glance, looking me up and down before smirking. I tried to ignore it. Soon, the presentations began. One by one, the contestants stepped onto the stage to showcase their work. Some projects were impressive, while others felt a bit predictable. It was clear that the competition was fierce, but I remained focused. Then it was my turn. I stood up, took a deep breath, and walked confidently onto the stage. As I approached the podium, I could feel the spotlight on me, the bright lights almost blinding. I could sense the weight of dozens of eyes on me, but I refused to let it overwhelm me. This was my moment, and I had prepared for it. I cleared my throat and began. My project is a fusion of modern minimalism and timeless nature-inspired elements. It's built around a concept that connects design with personal history. I clicked the remote, and my designs appeared on the large screen behind me. Floral patterns filled the space, each one inspired by the drawings my son used to make for me when he was a child. As I spoke, I saw the audience start to pay attention. People leaned forward, some even jotting down notes. I could tell they were engaged with my work. It felt good to have their attention, and I started to feel a little more confident. I had done well. In fact, I believed I had done better than some of the others. Then, it was time for the judgment. A tall, stylish woman, who I assumed was the competition director, stepped onto the stage. She smiled at the audience before turning toward us, the finalists. "Thank you all for being here," she said, her voice clear and professional. "We've seen many interesting projects today, and we truly appreciate your creativity and dedication. However, talent alone is not enough. You must also meet the industry's standards." She paused for a moment, and then her gaze swept across the room, stopping when it landed on me. "Oh, and of course," she added, her tone taking on a slight hint of amusement, "we have our most unique finalist." A few people chuckled softly, almost knowingly. I felt a lump form in my throat. It was a small gesture, but it stung. She turned her full attention to me and continued. "Anna, your project is certainly impressive, The details, the concept, the execution, it's all very refined. I felt a brief surge of pride, but it quickly faded as she carried on. But, as we all know, success in design isn't just about ideas, it's also about image. A wave of discomfort washed over me. You see, she went on, design is an industry of fresh perspectives, youthful energy, and, well, we all have to accept that sometimes a certain look is just as important as skill. At that moment, I felt a small laugh come from the back of the room, the kind of laugh that wasn't quite loud enough to be openly disrespectful, but loud enough for me to hear. It was the polite way of saying, "You're too old for this." I had expected some skepticism, perhaps even some questioning of my approach. But this felt like outright humiliation. It wasn't about the design anymore. It was about my age. They weren't seeing me as a designer. They were seeing me as someone who didn't belong in a world full of youthful faces. The competition director smiled theatrically and concluded, "And now, the winner of this year's competition." I didn't need to hear the name. I already knew. It wasn't me. I had given my best. I had poured my heart into this project. I had proven my skill, my experience, my creativity, but none of that seemed to matter in that moment. I hadn't been judged by my work. I had been judged by my age. I took a deep breath, trying to hold on to my dignity as I walked off the stage. I forced myself to move gracefully, but inside, something had cracked. I could feel the sting of failure, but what hurt even more was the sense that I had been dismissed before I even had a real chance. The next day, I tried my best to distract myself from the experience. I kept myself busy, but no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the humiliation I had felt the day before. It lingered, a constant weight on my mind. It wasn't just the loss that hurt. It was the realization that, in that moment, I had not been judged by my work. I had been judged by something I couldn't change. That night was supposed to be special. Daniel was bringing his fiancée over for dinner, and I had been looking forward to it for days. I wanted everything to go perfectly for him, so I decided not to say anything about the humiliation I had experienced earlier. I didn't want to ruin his evening or cause any tension. The doorbell rang, and I wiped my hands on a towel before heading to open the door. When I opened it, Daniel was standing there, smiling brightly. My heart skipped a beat, but as he stepped inside, I froze. It was her, the same woman who had humiliated me at the competition just days before, Rosalind. "Mom, this is Rosalind, my fiancée," Daniel introduced her warmly. My stomach twisted and I felt weak in my knees. Rosalind smiled widely, extending her hand toward me. "Anna, it's so wonderful to finally meet you. Daniel has told me so much about you." I managed a polite smile, though I could feel my heart racing. "The pleasure is mine," I said, keeping my voice steady. She knew I wouldn't say anything in front of Daniel, and that knowledge was enough to make her smug. Daniel wrapped an arm around me, smiling. "Mom, you have no idea how proud I am of you." He looked at me with such warmth and admiration, then added, "Tell us, how did your presentation go?" I glanced at Rosalind, who was waiting for me to answer. I could see the curiosity in her eyes, but I didn't want to let her have the satisfaction of knowing how much she had affected me. "Oh, the results aren't in yet," I said, holding her gaze. "But I'm confident I'll get the position." For the first time, her smile faltered slightly. I noticed it, but I didn't acknowledge it. Daniel stepped into the kitchen to grab the wine, and Rosalind leaned in closer. Her voice lowered, and she said in a whisper, "You'll get the job, as long as you keep quiet about yesterday." I held her gaze, refusing to back down. "I might consider it," I said coolly. "After all, this is about my son's happiness." Rosalind's tense posture relaxed as she flashed a triumphant smile. "Of course, Anna," she said smoothly, trying to regain her composure. "But there's one condition," I continued, my tone firm. "And what's that?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "You will treat me with respect," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "From now on." She paused for a moment, taken aback, but then smiled again. "Of course, Anna," she replied, her voice calm and reassuring. She had regained control of the conversation, but I knew I had planted a seed of doubt in her. The rest of the evening went smoothly. Rosalind was the picture of grace and virtue, charming everyone with her polished demeanor. But underneath her perfect exterior, I knew exactly what kind of person she was. People like her didn't just compromise. They played to win, no matter the cost. When the evening came to a close and Daniel and Rosalind left, I climbed the stairs to my studio, eager to unwind. But when I opened the door, I was met with an awful sight. My project was gone. The sketches I had left on my desk, the notes I had carefully written, everything was missing. My heart sank as I realized what had happened. My work had been stolen. It wasn't just that she had taken my designs. It was that she had taken something deeply personal to me. The project I had worked so hard on, the project that had been the culmination of years of my creativity, had been taken from me by someone I trusted. But the game wasn't over yet. I wasn't going to let Rosalind get away with this. Days passed, and her stolen project slowly made its way into the world. She paraded my designs and ideas as her own, basking in the spotlight and claiming to have revolutionized modern advertising. She played the part of the successful designer who had set a new trend. I could have exposed her. I could have gone public with the truth, but I didn't. Instead, I waited. I knew that stolen work always carries fingerprints, and Rosalind had unknowingly set herself up for a fall. I didn't have to rush. Time would reveal the truth, and she would be caught. It all came to a head at the engagement party. The evening was extravagant, a celebration of Rosalind's success. At the center of it all was Rosalind, glowing with pride and basking in the admiration of everyone around her. She raised her glass and announced, "And the best part?" she said, her voice carrying across the room. "The campaign has been such a massive success that we're already in talks for an even bigger project. Just imagine. Who would have thought a simple idea could become a trendsetter?" She beamed as everyone applauded, soaking in the admiration. Daniel stood beside her, his eyes shining with pride. "That's amazing, babe," he said, beaming at her. "Tell us about the campaign again. What was the inspiration behind it?" Rosalind smiled and turned to Daniel. "Oh, it's a mix of modern minimalism and natural elements, floral patterns that evoke nostalgia and warmth." Then, with a proud smile, she looked directly at Daniel. The words hung in the air, and I could almost hear the irony in them. Those floral patterns, the ones she claimed were hers, were mine. Every curve, every petal, had been inspired by my son's childhood drawings, by my life, my history. But now, they were hers to claim, and she was using them to build her empire. She had no idea that I was watching, that I was already one step ahead. The truth would come out soon enough, and when it did, Rosalind would find herself unable to hide behind her stolen success. "I can finally show you how it looks," Rosalind said, her voice full of excitement. "Watch, darling. My masterpiece. My pride." As she pulled out her phone to show Daniel, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. He stared at the screen for a moment, then looked at me. "Wait, that looks familiar?" His gaze shifted back and forth between me and Rosalind. "Mom, doesn't that look like your project?" I met his eyes and nodded. "Yes, it does." Rosalind quickly tried to brush it off. "Oh, come on, Daniel. It's just a coincidence. A common concept, really." But Daniel wasn't buying it. His face darkened with realization. "No, it's not just a coincidence. I know those designs. Those were my early drawings." He turned to look at me, his expression filled with confusion. "Mom, could you explain this, please?" I took a deep breath. The time had come. I had kept quiet for too long, but now I needed to tell him everything. "It started before the competition even ended," I began, my voice steady but heavy with emotion. "I was humiliated in front of everyone, by Rosalind. And then the next day, I opened my door and saw her as your fiancée." Daniel's face went pale as he processed the words. "Wait, you mean..." His voice trailed off as though he couldn't believe what I was saying. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because we made a deal," I said, my tone soft but firm. I gave her a chance. She promised to treat me respectfully, and in return, I wouldn't ruin things between you two. Daniel turned sharply toward Rosalind, his face growing more frustrated. "And then what? What happened next?" Rosalind took a deep breath, her voice smooth as she tried to defend herself. "Your mother is talented, Daniel, no doubt. But let's be honest. She's not exactly competitive in today's market. The way she presents herself is outdated. But the ideas, they were brilliant. They just needed a fresh touch." "A fresh touch?" Daniel repeated, his voice tight with anger. "What do you mean by that?" Rosalind hesitated before answering. "I borrowed some of her ideas. I thought I could make them work. And then, once the campaign was successful, I was going to share the success." I raised an eyebrow, feeling a sense of disbelief. "When exactly were you planning to do that?" She hesitated again, then finally spoke. "Well, I needed time. I wanted to establish it first." "Would that be before or after you stole my project from my home?" I interrupted. Daniel inhaled sharply, his face turning red with anger. "You took it? From Mom's studio?" Rosalind stammered, her confident facade starting to crack. "Rosalind," Daniel said slowly, his voice laced with disappointment, "I never thought you were capable of something like this." For the first time, she had no words. She stood there, her mouth open, but nothing came out. Daniel's voice grew cold, his anger sharp. "We're done. I can't marry someone who could do this to my mother, to me." With that, Rosalind stormed out, leaving behind a trail of shocked murmurs and whispers from the people who had been watching. The room grew silent, and Daniel exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple as if trying to process everything that had just happened. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "Because I needed you to see it for yourself," I answered honestly. I knew this was something he had to come to on his own, and he had. Daniel grabbed a large slice of the engagement cake, his face still filled with mixed emotions. He looked at me, his eyes softening. "Come on," he said, offering the cake to me. "Where are we going?" I asked, unsure of what he meant. "To the park," he replied. "Let's eat this cake like we used to." We made our way to the park, sitting together on a bench under the stars. As we ate the cake, we laughed and talked, just like we had in the past. In that moment, the world seemed a little lighter. I had lost a job I had worked so hard for, but I had reclaimed my dignity. And more importantly, I still had my son. That was all that mattered.